My name is Rachel Collins, and for 11 years, my husband controlled every dollar that came into our house. What he didn't realize was that while he controlled the money, I controlled the silence. And silence, when held long enough, becomes power. If you enjoy stories about strength, survival, and women finding their independence after difficult marriages, consider subscribing to the channel. New stories are shared regularly, and each one is meant to remind you that change is possible, no matter how long you've stayed quiet. People always thought my marriage looked solid from the outside. Nice house in a quiet New Jersey neighborhood, joint holiday photos, matching smiles for Facebook. What nobody saw was how quiet my life had become. Not peaceful quiet, controlled quiet. The kind where you learn to swallow words before they ever reach your mouth. The kind where silence feels safer than honesty. I was 24 when I married Mark. He was charming, confident, the kind of guy who spoke like he had life figured out. I worked as a dental assistant back then. Nothing fancy, but I paid my bills and liked my independence. Mark hated that word, independence. He didn't say it outright, but it showed. After we got married, he suggested I quit working. "Why stress yourself out?" he said. "I've got us covered." It sounded loving, protective. I didn't see the trap yet. The first red flag came 6 months later when I asked where my paycheck savings went. He smiled, calm as ever, and said, "I moved it into our joint account. No need for secrets between husband and wife." That night, I realized I no longer had a debit card in my name. He said it was just easier this way, more organized, less messy. Soon, everything went through him. Groceries, gas, even a cup of coffee. If I needed money, I had to ask. And if I asked too much, I got the sigh, the look, the lecture about budgeting better. Funny thing was, I never overspent. I just wasn't allowed to spend freely. Mark liked to remind me who was providing. Anytime we argued, it came up. "I pay for this house. I work all day while you sit at home." I did sit at home, raising our 2 kids, keeping the house running, cooking, cleaning, managing everything he never noticed. But in his eyes, that didn't count as work. The control got tighter over time. He'd question receipts, check timestamps on my phone, ask why gas cost more this week. Once he laughed and said, "You'd be lost without me." I laughed too, on the outside. Inside, something cracked. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how small I felt, like I had to earn basic respect, like my voice was optional. So I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I stopped fighting. I let him think he'd won. But what Mark never understood was this. While he was busy controlling the money, I was watching, listening, learning. I memorized patterns. I learned what silence could hide, and I learned how to survive without tipping him off. Every controlled dollar taught me patience. Every insult taught me restraint. Every night I cried quietly in the bathroom, I promised myself one thing: I won't always be this woman. I didn't know when or how, but I knew I was done disappearing. The breaking point didn't come with a scream or a slap. It came on an ordinary Tuesday, standing in the grocery store aisle when my card declined for a $12 purchase, and Mark texted me, "Put it back. We don't need it." That's when I realized this wasn't a marriage. It was a cage, and I had already started figuring out how to unlock it.
After that grocery store moment, something shifted in me. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was more like a light flicking on in a room I'd been stumbling around in for years. I drove home with the bags lighter than they should have been, hands tight on the steering wheel, heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. Mark wasn't just bad with money control, he was using it to keep me small, and I was done pretending I didn't see it. That night, I didn't say a word. Mark came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, and complained about traffic like he always did. I nodded, served dinner, listened to him talk about his day like it mattered more than anyone else's. On the outside, I was the same quiet wife. On the inside, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Silence became my shield. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. I noticed how Mark bragged about his job, but never let me see his actual paycheck. How he'd say we were tight on money, then show up with a new watch or plan a boys' weekend in Atlantic City. I noticed how every financial rule applied to me, but somehow never to him. That's when I made my first move. It wasn't big, it wasn't risky, it was smart. I started doing cash back at the grocery store. $10 here, $20 there. Nothing noticeable. I tucked the cash into an old winter boot box in the back of my closet. It felt wrong at first, like I was doing something illegal, but then I remembered how wrong it felt asking permission to buy shampoo. That guilt faded real fast. Next, I called my old boss from the dental office. I hadn't talked to her in years, but she remembered me, said she always liked my work ethic. She didn't have a full-time position, but she needed help on Saturdays. Cash pay, no paperwork, no questions. I almost cried on the phone, not because of the job, but because for the first time in years, someone saw me as capable. I didn't tell Mark. Saturday mornings, I told him I was taking the kids to my sister's place. He barely looked up from his phone. That stung more than it should have, but it also confirmed something important. He didn't care where I went, as long as I wasn't costing him money. The double life was exhausting. Smiling at home, working quietly on weekends, hiding cash, keeping notes in my head because I didn't dare write anything down. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I was crazy, if maybe I was overreacting, if maybe this was just how marriages are. Then Mark crossed another line. One night, after a fight about money, again, he laughed and said, "Relax, what are you going to do? Leave? You don't even have your own bank account." He said it like a joke, like it was funny. I smiled back, calm, soft, silent. Inside, my decision locked into place. From that moment on, everything I did had purpose. Every quiet yes, every swallowed argument, every calm response when he tried to bait me. I wasn't being weak anymore. I was being strategic. Mark thought he had all the control because he held the money. What he didn't see was that I was building something stronger. Freedom doesn't always start with a loud exit. Sometimes it starts with a quiet plan. And mine was already in motion.
The scariest part of planning your escape isn't the leaving. It's pretending you're not planning anything at all. Every day, I woke up beside a man who thought he owned my future. And every day, I had to act like I believed it too. That kind of acting messes with your head. Some mornings, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Other mornings, I saw something new behind my eyes. Focus, determination, hunger for a life that actually felt like mine. My Saturdays at the dental office became my lifeline. The work was familiar, grounding. The smell of antiseptic, the hum of equipment, the simple rhythm of helping patients. It reminded me who I was before I became Mark's wife. Every envelope of cash I brought home felt like oxygen. I didn't spend a cent of it. I stacked it, neat and careful, like I was building a staircase one bill at a time. At home, Mark got worse. The more confident he felt in his control, the bolder he became. He'd comment on my clothes, asking why I bothered dressing up if I smiled. Inside, I memorized every word, not out of bitterness, but because one day I wanted to remember exactly why I left. One night, he sat at the kitchen table going through our bank app, scrolling like a bored king checking his kingdom. "We're cutting back," he said. "No more extras. You don't need to be going out so much anyway." I nodded. "Okay." He looked surprised. "That's it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Whatever you think is best." That response confused him. He liked resistance. He liked watching me shrink. My silence took that away from him, and I could tell it bothered him. Control doesn't feel powerful when no one fights it. A few weeks later, I opened a bank account in my name only. I used my sister's address. I felt like my heart might jump out of my chest when the clerk slid the paperwork toward me. Signing my name felt unreal, like I was reclaiming a part of myself I'd buried. I deposited my first $200. It wasn't much, but it was mine, all mine. The guilt hit me later that night, out of nowhere. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I was destroying my family, if I was selfish, if my kids would blame me someday. Then I remembered standing in that grocery store aisle, card declined, feeling humiliated and helpless. I remembered Mark's laugh when he said I couldn't leave. That guilt turned into anger, calm, steady anger. The turning point came when my daughter asked me, "Mom, why do you always ask Daddy before buying stuff?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart. That night, after the kids were asleep, Mark picked another fight, something small, like always. When I didn't engage, he snapped. "You've been acting weird," he said. "Quiet, sneaky. Don't forget who pays the bills around here." I met his eyes and said nothing, but in my head, a voice spoke loud and clear. Not for much longer. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing, and soon silence wouldn't be enough. The closer I got to leaving, the heavier everything felt. Not because I doubted myself, but because I finally understood what I was about to lose. Not the marriage, that was already gone. I was losing the illusion, the story I'd been telling myself for years, that if I stayed quiet, stayed grateful, stayed small, things would eventually get better. They weren't going to get better. They were going to get tighter. Mark started checking in more, asking where I was, who I talked to, why I needed gas again. The irony almost made me laugh. The moment I stopped needing his approval emotionally, he sensed it. Control freaks always do. They don't notice silence until it stops serving them. One night, he asked to see my phone. No reason, just held his hand out like it was a normal thing. My heart slammed into my ribs, but my face stayed calm. Why? Because I'm your husband, he said, and I want to. That old fear crept up my spine, but I pushed it down. I handed him the phone. There was nothing on it. No messages, no notes, no calls that could give me away. I'd learned to keep my plans in my head. He scrolled for a minute, then tossed it back, annoyed. You've been distant, he said. Don't forget who you'd be without me. I nodded. Inside, something hardened. The next week, he cut my grocery budget again, said prices were going up, said I needed to be more creative. I fed my kids the same meals, smiled the same smile, and kept stacking cash in my closet. I was up to almost $4,000 now, enough to breathe, enough to believe. Then the universe tested me. My car broke down on the side of the road one afternoon with both kids in the back seat. Smoke, flashing lights, the whole mess. I called Mark, shaking, and told him what happened. He sighed, actually sighed, and said, "Can't you call roadside? I'm in a meeting." I waited 40 minutes for help while my kids asked why Daddy wasn't coming. That was the moment something snapped clean in half. Not anger, not sadness, hope. Any hope that he'd show up when it really mattered. That night, when he got home, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't argue. I asked him for money to fix the car. He said, "We'll see." I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and cried silently into a towel. Not because I was scared, but because I was done. Done negotiating my worth. Done asking permission to survive. 2 days later, I signed up for a full-time position at the dental office. Lower pay than Mark's job, but steady. Honest. Mine. I didn't tell him. I started packing small things, documents, kids' favorite clothes, one grocery bag at a time. Hiding them in my sister's garage. The silence between us grew thick. Mark mistook it for obedience. It wasn't. It was the calm before a woman walks away.
I didn't leave the day I planned to. Life rarely gives you clean exits. It gives you pressure, stress, and moments where you either shrink back into what's familiar or step forward, even if your legs are shaking. For me, that moment came on a Sunday morning, the kind that's supposed to feel slow and safe. Mark was in a bad mood before his coffee even kicked in, slamming cabinets, complaining about noise, nitpicking everything, how I folded the laundry, how the kids were dressed, how I'd bought the wrong brand of cereal. I stayed quiet, moving around the kitchen like a ghost, keeping my voice low. Silence had kept the peace for years, but that morning, it wasn't enough for him. He looked at me and said, "You've been useless lately." Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. Something inside me went still, not numb, clear. I looked at my kids sitting at the table, watching us, watching me, and I saw the future like a punch to the gut. A daughter learning to ask permission for basic needs, a son learning that control equals love. That was the line, the one I wouldn't let them cross. I didn't respond. I cleaned the counter. I packed lunches. I kissed my kids' heads. Mark smirked, thinking he'd won again. He left the house without another word. I waited 10 minutes after the door slammed. Then I moved. I grabbed the folder I'd hidden behind the cleaning supplies, birth certificates, social security cards, my resume, copies of bank statements. I called my sister and said the words I'd practiced 100 times in my head. "I'm coming today." She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll open the garage." I loaded the car with the bags I'd prepared. Nothing big, nothing noticeable, just what mattered. When I buckled my kids in, my hands were shaking so hard I had to pause and breathe. Not because I wasn't sure, but because this was real now. Halfway to my sister's place, Mark called. "Where are you?" he asked. "Out," I said. "With what money?" he snapped. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, "Mine." The silence on the other end was thick. Confused. Angry. Dangerous. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I slept on an air mattress on my sister's living room floor. My kids curled up beside me, safe, asleep, unaware of how close their world had come to repeating the same patterns. I stared at the ceiling, heart racing, mind loud. I was scared. Anyone who says they weren't scared is lying. But fear felt different now. It wasn't paralyzing. It was sharp, focused. Mark left voicemail after voicemail. Angry, then apologetic, then angry again. He threatened lawyers, money, custody. He told me I'd fail, that I'd come crawling back. I deleted every message without responding. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and logged into my new bank account. I transferred every dollar I had saved. Then I checked my work email. My first official shift started Monday. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Tired, pale, but standing. For the first time in years, no one was watching my spending. No one was controlling my choices. No one was shrinking my voice. I didn't know how hard the road ahead would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back.
The first few weeks on my own felt like walking on a frozen lake. Every step was careful, every decision heavy. I kept waiting for something to crack, for Mark to show up at my sister's house, for my bank account to hit zero, for reality to slap me and say, "You can't actually do this." But none of that happened. What did happen was quieter, harder, more real. I started my new job on a Monday morning with a borrowed lunch bag and nerves buzzing under my skin. The office manager smiled, handed me a schedule, and treated me like I belonged there. That alone nearly broke me. No suspicion, no control, just trust. I worked hard, harder than I ever had, because this wasn't just a job. This was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Money was tight, real tight. I tracked every dollar. Some nights, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and felt the panic creep in. Rent, childcare, gas, groceries. There wasn't room for mistakes. But there was something new in the air. Choice. If I spent money, it was my call. If I said no, it was my boundary. That freedom felt better than any comfort Mark had ever provided. Mark didn't make it easy. He filed for divorce fast, like he was trying to punish me for leaving first. His lawyer sent letters full of threats. Money he claimed I owed, things he said I'd never get. He still tried to control the narrative, told mutual friends I'd lost it, that I was unstable, that I'd run off with his kids. I stopped defending myself. Silence had always been my survival tool. Now it became my strength. The custody hearing was the hardest day of my life. Sitting across from him in a courtroom, watching him look so sure of himself, so convinced he still held all the power. He talked about finances, about how I couldn't provide. I listened, calm, hands folded, heart pounding but steady. Then it was my turn. I talked about consistency, about caregiving, about showing up, about how money without safety means nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just told the truth. Turns out, judges see through control pretty damn fast when you stop being afraid of it. When the temporary custody order came through, primary custody to me, I cried in my car. Not from victory, from relief. Life slowly found a rhythm. School drop-offs, work, dinner, homework, exhaustion. There were days I missed the house, missed the illusion of security, missed not worrying so much. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the grocery store aisle, the declined card, the feeling of being trapped. I wasn't trapped anymore. One night, my daughter crawled into bed beside me and whispered, "Mom, you're happier." I didn't even realize it until she said it. Happier didn't mean easy. Stronger didn't mean fearless. It meant I chose myself over control, over silence, over staying small. And that choice was changing everything.
About 6 months after I left, something strange happened. Life stopped feeling like an emergency all the time. The panic that used to sit in my chest like a rock loosened its grip. I still struggled, don't get me wrong, but the struggle felt honest now, earned, mine. I wasn't surviving someone else's rules anymore. I was building my own. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment not far from the kids' school. It wasn't fancy. Thin walls, old carpet, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people at once. But when I signed that lease with my own name and my own paycheck, my hand shook in a good way. That apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was proof that I didn't need permission to exist. Mark hated that. He tried new tactics once he realized fear wasn't working anymore. Suddenly, he was polite, reasonable. He offered to help financially, as long as I followed his suggestions. I saw right through it. Control dressed up as kindness still smells the same. I thanked him and said no. That word used to choke me. Now it came out clean. At work, my confidence grew fast. The dentist noticed, gave me more responsibility, trusted me with patience. One afternoon, during a busy shift, she pulled me aside and said, "You're solid. You ever think about further certification?" That question hit me like a lightning bolt. Nobody had asked me about my future in years. I went home that night and looked up night classes. Just looking felt powerful. The real turning point came at a school event, parents' night. I almost didn't go, old habits die hard, but my daughter begged me. So I went, alone. No Mark beside me, no one controlling the conversation. And you know what? I held my own. I talked to teachers, laughed with other parents. I wasn't invisible. I was just me. Later that night, Mark texted me, "You look tired today. This life isn't sustainable." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because the truth was, I wasn't tired in the way he meant. I was tired like someone who works hard for something that matters. Not tired from being drained. Not tired from shrinking. There's a huge difference. The kids were changing too. They laughed more, fought less. My son stopped flinching when voices got loud. My daughter stopped whispering questions. Our home felt lighter, safer, real. One night after they were asleep, I sat on the couch and thought about the woman I used to be. The one who stayed quiet because it felt safer. The one who believed love meant endurance. I didn't hate her. I respected her. She survived long enough to get me here. Mark still thought silence meant weakness. He never realized I'd outgrown that version of silence. This silence wasn't fear. It was peace. And peace doesn't ask permission. The final shift didn't come with fireworks or closure. It came quietly, the way real change usually does. One ordinary afternoon, I was folding laundry in my apartment when I realized something that stopped me cold. I wasn't thinking about Mark anymore. Not in anger, not in fear, not even in relief. He had faded into the background of my life, like noise you don't notice once it's gone. That's when I knew I'd made it out for real. The divorce finalized a few weeks later. No dramatic courtroom scene, no last-minute apologies, just signatures, tired lawyers, and a strange sense of calm settling over me as I walked out of the building. I sat in my car for a long minute afterward, hands on the wheel, breathing. 11 years ended in less than an hour. It felt unreal and freeing in a way I didn't expect. Mark tried one last time after that. A text. Short. Simple. "You didn't have to do it this way." I didn't reply. Because the truth was, I did. This was the only way that didn't cost me myself. A month later, I enrolled in evening classes to finish my certification. Between work, parenting, and studying, my days were packed. Exhausting, yeah, but purposeful. I wasn't just getting through life anymore. I was moving forward. There's a big difference between surviving and building, and I finally felt like I was building something solid. One night, while I was studying at the kitchen table, my daughter sat across from me coloring. She looked up and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you." That hit harder than anything Mark had ever said. Brave. Not quiet, not obedient, not careful. Brave. I realized then that my silence had changed shape. It wasn't about holding things in anymore. It was about choosing what deserved my energy. I didn't owe explanations to people who benefited from my exhaustion. I didn't owe access to people who confused control for love. Life still wasn't perfect. Bills showed up. Some nights I cried from pure fatigue. Some mornings I missed the version of stability I thought I had. But I never once missed being afraid in my own home. I never missed asking permission to live. And that told me everything. The irony is, Mark truly believed money was power. He thought whoever paid the bills ran the world. What he never learned was this: real power is knowing you can walk away and still stand. Real power is choosing yourself when no one else will. I used to think silence meant losing. Now I know better. Silence can be a strategy, a shield, a bridge to freedom. He controlled the money, I controlled the silence. And in the end, silence is what set me free.
People ask me now how I did it, how I walked away, how I rebuilt, how I stopped being afraid. I never know how to answer that in one clean sentence, because the truth isn't pretty or simple. I didn't wake up brave one day. I didn't suddenly become strong. I was terrified the whole time. I just learned something most people never do. I learned that fear doesn't disappear before change. It walks with you. For years, I thought survival meant endurance. Keep your head down, don't rock the boat, make it work. That's what we're taught, especially as women. Be patient, be grateful, be quiet. What no one tells you is how dangerous that lesson can be when you're being slowly erased. How silence, when forced on you, becomes a cage. But silence, when chosen, becomes a weapon. I didn't leave my marriage because I hated Mark. I left because I was disappearing, because my kids were watching me shrink. Because love that costs you your voice isn't love. It's control wearing a friendly face. And I refused to let my children grow up thinking that's normal. The hardest part wasn't the money. It wasn't the work. It wasn't even the loneliness. The hardest part was trusting myself again, learning that my instincts weren't broken, that I wasn't too sensitive or dramatic or bad with decisions. I wasn't weak. I was conditioned. And once I saw that, everything changed. Today, my life is smaller in ways that matter less, and bigger in ways that matter more. I don't have a big house. I don't have extra money lying around, but I have peace. I have safety. I have mornings where I breathe easy and nights where I sleep without fear. I have children who see a mother who chooses herself without guilt. That's worth more than any paycheck ever was. Mark still tells people his version of the story. I let him. I don't correct it. I don't defend myself. Because the people who really matter can see the difference. And the ones who can't, they were never meant to walk this part of the road with me. If you're listening to this and you feel that quiet ache in your chest, the one that whispers something isn't right, listen to it. If you're tired of asking permission to exist, if you're shrinking to keep the peace, if you're being told you can't survive on your own, hear this clearly. You can. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to be fearless. You just need one moment of honesty with yourself, one decision to stop betraying your own voice. I didn't leave loud. I didn't leave perfect. I left prepared. He controlled the money. I controlled the silence. And when I finally broke that silence, not with words, but with action, I didn't just leave a marriage. I reclaimed my life.